Hey, Allison.
Hi. Hi, folks. Looks like we got a lot of people popping in. So
Hello.
exciting. My kitchen smells amazing. We were talking about this the other day. We need to develop smell-o-vision, and I think they should get on that.
Love that.
All right. I'm just pulling my last piece together, and then we'll get started. Give everybody a few minutes to get in.
Hey, everybody. Super excited to see you all.
Nice
Thanks
to
for
see you.
joining.
Hi, Chris.
Hello, Mr. Leo. How are you, sir?
Well, thank you.
It's quite the cheese board you got there. I'm jealous.
Oh, it's a little bit short on some ingredients. Get into the market. There's lines pretty much at our local market all day, and it gets a little frustrating. So I'm not interested in waiting.
Definitely.
It looks good to
You
me.
make with what you can.
Oh, bowl. I'll be right back. Okay. All right.
Allison, we're so excited to see what you got cooking up.
I'm so excited to do this with you guys, and thanks everybody for being here. I see a whole bunch of folks have popped in to join our little Friday cooking class. I actually have been a chef in San Francisco Bay Area for like 15 or 16 years. I used to do a lot of these demos and sort of cooking classes at the Ferry Building. I've done them at various farmers markets, and for a long time, maybe 4 years running, around 2011, I used to do this celebrity chef demo where it was with a local MC named Liam Maklem, and we'd get all these celebrity chefs to come through, and they would, cook one of their dishes for the crowd. But I was the guy behind going, having the 20 minutes later, it looks like this, and then I would prepare the audience samples and things. So I haven't done a cooking demo in a long time, but it's something I always enjoy doing. So this is such a fun way to do something different on Friday afternoon in quarantine.
Yeah, and we're so happy to join with you, Allison. It's been fantastic. To introduce Allison a little bit, Allison is the CEO now of Ends and Stems, which is a fantastic meal planning subscription where she helps you figure out recipes where you can make use of some of the same ingredients over several meals. I'll let you tell it better, Allison. I just wanted to let you.
It's possibly even more appropriate now. Having cooked for a lot of people and I had a big cafe and a catering company for a while, and the amount of food that got wasted, both on our side, at the client side when I would serve catered food to them, just really started to weigh on me. And then right around 2015, they came out with these big reports about the environmental impacts of food waste as well. And it's not just the food that you have that you don't eat that gets wasted, but if you think all the way up the supply chain, everything that went into producing that food is also wasted, all of those resources. And when I spoke with home cooks who, I've always counseled and tried to teach, they care about that. Nobody likes wasting food. I think it's so ingrained in us, we don't want to do it. But most people said they were just so busy and overwhelmed on a typical, weeknight that also thinking about food waste was just one thing too many. So Ends and Stems, the point is to help you meal plan by really doing the heavy lifting of meal planning for you on an app. You can easily select your recipes or choose to go with the ones that I've selected. And then with just 2 or 3 clicks, it generates a full grocery list. So you know what to buy when you go to the store, and you have the plan in place so that it's a lot easier to follow through when you get home. I also am a parent. I have 2 toddlers myself. So I write really doable, simple weeknight recipes. There was this amazing article a couple years ago that came out about the difference or the delta between the recipes that we're watching celebrity chefs cook and then what we actually cook at home. So I actually try to close that gap. So I hope all of these recipes you'll find to be sometimes maybe inspired by the traditional way of doing things, but just simplified so that it's really something you can pull off.
Yeah. And when Allison and I met, Ends and Stems very clear focus on reducing food waste, and Proclamation's mission about cooking for good, and a big part of that being reducing food waste. In the fact that Tony has led the design and development of the Proclamation to be designed to cook whatever you may want to, whatever you can, whatever's available. It's a natural partnership, and we're lucky that technology allows us to start doing this virtually when we plan to do it in person, but here we are.
And so we met at I was speaking on a panel about sustainability, and Chris and his team were there. And they said they have a local San Francisco-based company that's producing cookware. And obviously, as a chef, I was like, yes, I want to see this cookware. Yes, I want to cook something in it. And it's great. And it's just been a really fun partnership. My business is small. You guys have a few more team members than I do, but it's still, pretty small.
We're just going. Yeah.
So it's been really fun to get to know you guys and doing things like this too. It's just fun to feel like we have a partner in it. So I'm definitely gonna be cooking everything in my Proclamation pans, and we'll get Tony to talk about the design of everything as we go. But let's get started. I guess the first thing I want to say, I know it looks like most people are on mute and the videos are off, which is cool, but we do have Bridget who's fielding the comment section. I love getting questions. So I don't care if you want to talk about general cooking questions, organic food versus not, how to shop right now, anything you want to fire at me, I'll see if I know the answer, or we'll find an answer for you at some point.
Yeah,
so,
and I would say also, feel free to join and if you're up for it, turn on your videos, come off mute when you have questions or whatnot. What Tony and I are doing here, really, so Alison's got a couple things prepped so she can show you how she can start with a roast chicken and then move through several meals, ending with enchiladas by the end of the week, and making some stock along the way and some soup, and it's going to be fantastic. That's going to be my challenge as we go out and stock up on groceries today, for me to do the same and follow this lead. So hopefully some of you, if you haven't already stocked up, can do the same. And Tony and I have some wine in hand, and we're going to make this little early happy hour on the West Coast, happy hour on the East Coast. So feel free to join us if you guys would like as well.
Yeah, so we have 4 great recipes, and it's all starting with the roast chicken. So the first time, actually, I looked at the Proclamation website, the first thing, you guys had a picture of this big hybrid pan, which is this one, and it had a roast chicken in it. And I'm obsessed with the shape of this pan because I have an old pan that's a very similar shape, but it's tiny. So I love this shape for everything. So we're gonna make soup in here, but also I roasted the chicken in here, and I knew I was gonna need to do that myself. I also, one of my favorite meals ever is just a really simple, humble, old school roast chicken. It's so easy to pull off. It makes your whole house smell amazing. And it's just this really classic way to cook one thing once and then eat multiple meals from that same one dish that you cooked. So when I talk to my customers who are trying to meal plan better, one of the things they say a lot is that they don't like leftovers. So people seem not to be into this idea of, like cooking one meal that they're going to eat 5 times that week. We get really bored and we want to eat something different. And that's when people end up ordering takeout and then letting the leftovers that they thought they were going to eat go to waste. So my first tenet of good meal planning to reduce food waste is always just be really honest with yourself. If you're not a leftovers person, don't cook so much that you're going to have leftovers. But with the roast chicken, which I started about an hour ago because I wanted to be able to start here. So I'll show you. It's been cooking for a while. Ooh, it looks so good.
Delicious.
That, especially now, we're home. That was hands off. It took me literally 3 minutes to prepare. That's why it doesn't even matter I did it in advance, because it's not that hard. I basically just plopped the chicken down in there, and you'll see in the recipe, the first thing I did was put some sliced onion and a halved garlic clove around it. So I took the whole head of garlic, and you gonna see that? Just cut it right in half, and then roasted this alongside the chicken. So what we can actually do is squeeze these little cloves of garlic out now that they're roasted, mash it up with a little lemon, salt, and olive oil, and it's also the sauce for the whole thing. So it's super easy. And now that you have the time, you put this in at 3 p.m. and you have your dinner ready to go. So I am gonna just check. So a question I get a lot is about doing big roasts. How do you know if it's done? So the real answer to the question is you use a thermometer. I'm not gonna use a thermometer. My problem with thermometers is I never trust them. You have to check them all the time. You have to make sure they're still working. You have to calibrate them in ice water. They never work. So I don't actually use a thermometer. So what I always tell people is, we want to get you comfortable with knowing when it's done. So some of the things you can look for, you can feel, just press on the breast meat a little bit. That part will cook more quickly than the leg meat. But you can start to feel, and again, you might not get this the first time. You just want to feel it so you start to know and remember what it feels like. And then the old school way our grandmothers used to do this, you kind of just wiggle here. The tendons that are cooking as they go, they loosen up. So once this feels really wiggly and you can kind of just pull it off, that's how you know that everything has been cooked through. And then you've obviously always heard the, poking it to see if the juices run clear. But sometimes if you have a really high quality chicken, the meat will actually be fully cooked, but it'll still look pretty pink. So you want to just kind of get used to how it feels and how wiggly this is. And I can tell that this meat is kind of just shredding apart as I pull it. So I'm going to say my chicken is done here. Yeah. And what I'm going to do is just plop it out. Okay, now under here, I added a little bit later my chopped up potatoes. I have an onion that I sliced up. And at the very end, I threw in, I also did some lemon slices. Because again, this is kind of just building our sauce in the pan here. So I'm going to stir it just to kind of coat my potatoes a little bit more. Because I can see that, yes.
Hello.
Okay, great. You want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi.
All right, bud. I think it's time for you to still go back to sleep a little bit more. Cooking in quarantine, right? It's family affair.
The timing was perfect. It couldn't have planned it better.
Exactly. I'm gonna close this. She's almost 5, so she's not in school yet. She'll be in kindergarten next year. So I'm gonna let my chicken rest. You can see it right here. In the meantime, we're gonna get the enchilada sauce going. So if you look up like a really classic enchilada or mole sauce, it starts with dried peppers that you might not have in your pantry at the moment. So we're gonna make kind of a cheater version of this sauce with more common ingredients if you're not regularly somebody who's cooking with dried peppers. So what I have here are whole tomatoes. If you don't have whole tomatoes, you can actually use a can of tomatoes. I have a little bit of a can left over from when I was making pizza the other day. So I'm gonna add that into my blender. Again,
I love it.
If you're trying to turn this into a pantry-friendly sauce, you can just go ahead and use canned tomatoes, whatever, if you have whole or diced already. And then I'm gonna add some aromas just because I have them. Let's see. And for the chili flavor, we're gonna actually use chili powder. Next time you're shopping and really have a moment to check out the spice section, you can look for single types of chilies into chili powder. So for instance, you might be able to find like ancho chili powder or jalapeno chili powder, which would be dried chipotle, or chipotle rather is dried jalapeno. So you could look for chipotle chili powder. They tend to just be, I don't know, it's kind of like the same thing as like a wine, a single type of grape turned into wine, or a single origin chocolate or coffee. It's kind of the same thing with chili peppers. And it's just a little bit, you have a little bit more control over the spice level, the flavor, the sweetness than you would if you just get cheapy chili powder, which is what I have, cheapy chili powder. So that's what we're gonna use for this one. So we're gonna put in about a tablespoon. I'm gonna eyeball it, it's not that big of a deal. Also ground cumin. And
How spicy is a chili powder? I mean, if someone's sensitive to spice, is that something to be concerned about?
Yeah. Or? You know, the higher quality ones can get pretty expensive. There are a lot of great like
Oh, sorry, spicy was my question. Not.
Oh, spicy. Okay.
Yeah.
Regular chili powder, like the cheapy kind of blend that you find in the store, is not really going to have any spice in it at all. I actually have a whole jalapeno, so I'm going to add that to this. I'm going to go for the whole thing because I like it, and why not? Regular blend chili powder is not going to be spicy really at all. If you get some of the fancier, higher quality ones, they might be blended with peppers that do have more of a natural spice to them. And if you find like a chipotle powder, that will be a little bit spicier just because the chipotles are just naturally a little bit spicier. So
Allison, this is Tony. So if you want the pepper flavor but not the heat, then we would take the seeds out, right?
yeah, that's what they say classically.
Okay.
Tony's my friend who's watching the cooking video.
Hi.
Hey, Tony.
Hey guys. I've got my 5-year-old here too, so that's why I put it on mute.
Yeah, right?
My 5-year-old and my 9-year-old. So they're kind of, I said, this is a cooking show, but it's someone I know. They're like, Yes.
Yes, what Tony's talking about are the seeds and the membrane here. So if you cut this, and you can kind of easily slice around and take that center part out, like this. Typically, they say this part is not as spicy as this part. I don't always find that to be really true. Honestly, at times, the pepper can be as spicy. So the safest way to go, if you're concerned about adding that much, is just taste it and see how spicy it is.
Thank you.
If you ever want to know a good reason, like a way not to touch your face, is cut up a bunch of chili peppers and then go and touch, because, man.
Yeah. When I was in culinary school, actually, a student had to be removed from the classroom because we were making so much food and slicing so many chilies, and then he did touch his eyes. Ooh. And yeah, he had to leave that day.
I like to
It lasts for a really long time, and it's hard to wash off your hands too. It takes a little while.
I like to infuse tequilas with jalapenos, and I touch my face all the time at the house.
I saw your so on the Proclamation Instagram, they do a cocktail hour every Wednesdays. You guys do it?
Thursday.
I watched yesterday. I actually have a grapefruit, but I haven't made that paloma yet. It looks so delicious. Let's see. Okay, so if we had our chicken stock, which we'll make last, so you guys will kind of make this in a different order that I'm doing now. Our chicken stock, I would do a little bit in here, but I'm going to add a smidge of water. Which, if you're not making chicken stock, or let's say you wanted to make vegetarian enchiladas, either because you're vegetarian or you don't have the chicken, you can add water or canned stock. All right, give me a minute. Okay. Nice and smooth. Now, we do want to cook the sauce a little bit. So this step is important. I've got my carbon steel pan here. I'm going to turn this on. We'll do a little bit of oil. I have olive oil, but you could use avocado oil. You could use whatever you have. This step is going to cook all of the raw veggies and the spices that we put in there. So it's important when you use, especially lower quality dried spices, that you bloom them over heat and in oil, and it just brings out the flavors. It kind of melds the whole thing together a little bit more. And for enchilada sauce, it's also going to thicken it up a little bit. So we're going to pour this in here, and you'll see it's really, I love the smell of this, like the fresh blended jalapeno and the fresh blended tomatoes smells amazing. So we're going to get this simmering. We'll get that one going. Put this in here. Now, next we're gonna make the filling for the enchiladas. I've got my bowl. So in the recipe, I did black beans. I thought I had them. I don't. Not leaving the house. So I'm gonna use white beans, which taste really nice in the sauce too. I actually love white beans. You could use really, especially now, whatever you have. I'm using a can of beans. If you had dried beans, this would be an awesome time to put on a pot of beans all day. But I'm gonna use white beans. I have cheese here. I usually buy cheese in a block, so you can slice it or grate it, but I had a little bit of another kind there, so I'm gonna grate this. Now, as my chicken is cooling over there, the next thing I'm gonna show you how to do is slice the whole chicken. And we were talking before, Chris said he does like to eat the legs and thighs, but a lot of times when I've cooked for clients, they always tell me they just want the white meat, so it's harder to sell the dark pieces. So I like, personally, when I'm roasting the chicken, I'll serve the white meat for the family meal that day, for the roast chicken meal. And then if you shred the legs and the thighs and toss it with sauce and cheese and beans and turn it into enchiladas, nobody really knows the difference anyway. But the other great reason to do that is because the dark meat, as you've probably heard, is juicier and it's harder to overcook. So since we've already cooked it once and now we're essentially going to cook it again with the enchiladas, it won't dry out because it has more fat in it and it's harder to overcook. So I've got my cheese and my beans. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make these like one-step enchiladas. So rather than having each tortilla and touching it with the chicken, then the sauce, then the beans, and the cheese, I'm going to mix everything in here so that when I go to roll them together, it's just going to be like one plop on each tortilla and it's way faster. So I'm going to put in most of my cheese. If anyone's very good at eyeballing, and then looks at my recipe afterwards, you're gonna see that I'm adding, I don't know, probably double the amount of cheese than I wrote on the recipe. For some reason, I just can't bring myself to admit how much cheese I put in here. So a normal amount based on like what Tyler Florence did on his enchilada recipes. But I know that if you're going to your favorite Mexican restaurant, they're doing way more cheese than that. So if I'm honest, that's how I want it to be done too. Adding more cheese is not the type of thing that's going to mess up your recipe for something like this. So, all right, we'll do that. I'm going to set this aside for a second.
I can see that simmering right there.
Can you see it?
Must smell delicious.
And so it gets darker. Let's see. It gets darker in the middle, and it still stays, it's still pretty light on the edges. So I'm just going to stir this and let it go for a little while. So good. Yeah, it's spicy, but that like fresh jalapeno smell is so delicious. It's just like a fresh spring day. It's amazing. All right. So here's my chicken. You guys see this? Looks beautiful. All right. So who knows how to cut a chicken? Are we comfortable doing this? Got questions?
I want to see it from the pro.
Yeah, I want to see your pro style.
Okay, so here's what
I totally do not know how to cut a chicken. My husband does it.
Yes, I'm going to watch and learn.
Excellent. These are the juices. I'm actually going to put them in this pan because this is where I'm going to make stuff from eventually. Can you see me okay over here?
We got you.
Okay, so where you're going to start is still a little bit hot. If I had time, I would wait. But you're going to start in between where the leg starts naturally kind of breaking away anyway. And when I was in culinary school in butchery class, they always had you chant long, shallow strokes. So I still, like, I don't know, 16 years later, in my mind, whenever I'm cutting any sort of meat, think long, shallow strokes. And the reason for that is because you want nice, smooth lines, rather than if you do a lot of like hacking at it like this, you kind of just tear the meat apart, and that's when it looks torn apart. So you also want to have a sharp knife and let your knife do the work for you. So you don't, you really shouldn't having to force it. So you can see this kind of just fell apart. And because it's fully cooked through, now the bone popped out, and look, it almost I barely even cut that, and then the leg and thigh came off. Now, if you wanted to serve, my daughter actually loves the drumsticks, so I would normally save part of the drumstick for her. So kind of how it V's like that. You do the same, cut through there, and then you can use the knife and turn it a little bit. And if you just give it a little bit of pressure, you can see right where the bone, there, I can roll it. I'm trying to get this so you guys can see it.
You're going through the joint there, not through a bone, right?
Exactly, yeah. So you can see where the bones separate and where the joint is. And then that's the place you want to slice it. So then you have a nice drumstick, and then you have the thigh piece over here separately. So this is the same way you would do your Thanksgiving turkey as well. It's the same, it's just bigger. So then we're going to repeat on the other side. You kind of come around like that, and then this thigh really is just, you really don't have to apply that much pressure, and it kind of comes off. Same over here, and give it a little bit of a crack, and you can see right where the joint is, and then the two pieces come apart. So that's your dark meat. Now for the breast meat,
it's making it look really easy.
It should be, so super sharp knife and a well-cooked chicken, and it should come apart pretty easily. So your chicken.
Water here. I'm just hungry.
Right down the middle here is a piece of the breastbone that kind of comes up and divides it almost like a fin. So the first cut you want to make, you can kind of feel it with your fingers. And this is where the long, shallow strokes really come in. So you want to put your knife right next to it and then come down the back there. And then it's a little bit hot. Again, I would normally have let this rest a little bit longer. So I've got that all the way down, pretty much on one, I stayed on one side of the fin as far down as I could go. And then you want to come around to the side over here and go right above the wing. And you can curve up and just follow the shape of the breast. And then do a little bit there in the front. And what you'll see is that the whole thing, let's see if I can, without burning myself, show you. You can see that the whole thing kind of starts to fall off. And get your long strokes underneath. And then as you go, if you've accidentally sliced into the meat a little bit too much, you can just kind of recalibrate and you haven't gone too far and you can get that meat back in it. So you got a little cartilage there coming all the way down to the bottom. And then what you have is a perfect intact chicken breast. That's so hot.
I'm sorry, careful.
That's the other great reason to do a roast chicken for dinners. You can do it really early, and then when it's done, you can still leave it on the stovetop, and this thing will stay hot for like 30, 40 minutes. Then when you have the full breast like this, you go back across, and then you can get these beautiful slices like this with browned skin right on top. Super good. Okay. And then you would go back and do the other side, which we will do because we're going to make stock. But I need a bowl. Okay.
Alison, if you were to save like the other half of the chicken for a future meal, yes, would you save it on the bone or would you butcher it first?
So I always butcher it all off the bone because what I found is it's much easier to grab a piece that's ready to go or ready to incorporate into another meal than it is to have like this whole carcass sitting in your fridge and taking up space. The other thing is I don't always make stock immediately after I roast the chicken, but I do always save the carcass to make stock. So if you take all the meat off it, you can put it in the freezer right away. And then I usually just have one kind of, you know, frozen and ready to go.
How many, when you make stock in general, like how many carcasses would you need to make a substantial amount?
You know, I usually, when I'm doing it at home, I usually just do one because that typically is all I have. And for this size pot, you know, one, if you put in more than one, you'll get a richer stock, but you won't get very much of it. Mm-hmm. So unless you have a really big pot, I think one, you'll see when I put this in. So I'm going to put that guy in. Now you can go through and like pick off some extra pieces. There's definitely a little bit more meat on here. There's this great piece in the back that you can pull off. And then I have a little bit, I have some bones. These were in my freezer. I had these from last time I had a roast chicken. So I'm going to add those to there. And then my other food waste tip is that I always keep an extra produce bag or whatever kind of Tupperware or whatever. And then these are just extra scraps and bits. So a sort of sad looking piece of celery. This celery accidentally got frozen in the back of my fridge. And it's not that crunchy. It's kind of a sad looking thing, but it'll be great for stock because it can still impart its flavor. And then leeks are amazing. This is classic like restaurant stock. You always use the green part of the leek for sauteing or cooking somewhere, but then you use the dark greens in the stock. You can do any bits of onion. So you can actually use onion skins in stock. So let's say you're just peeling onions and you save these in a bag, especially if you bought the organic ones. This is all fine for stock. So you put that in. Then let's see, I would do a carrot. You can also, if you peel carrots or potatoes for any reason, you can save the peels and that would be a great use for your stock. If you have bits of parsley, like let's say you use the parsley for garnish, but then you just have sort of the stems. The stems are great in there. And my favorite, this is the end of a real piece of Parmigiano Reggiano. So when you get down to the very, very end, you kind of have this crusty piece. So this is amazing tossed into any type of soup, minestrone soup, any type of tomato soup. But you can also just add it into the stock. And it kind of just gives it like a rich, savory flavor. When I had a cafe, we used to do a lot of prepared meals and meal delivery. People would come and pick up stuff. We sold a lot of ribollita, which is an Italian white bean and kale soup. It's like one of my favorite soups. It's one of my favorite things to cook. And it always has an end of Parmesan in it. So we sold, I can't even tell you, I mean, we used to sell 100 quarts of this a week. Like we made so much ribollita. We made it in a pot that, you know, I could fit in practically. And one day we had a customer come in and she said she had to return the ribollita because she thought there was a dead mouse in it. And I almost like died. I almost moved to Antarctica. I was like, oh my God, I sold somebody soup with a dead mouse. We don't have mice. How is there a mouse in it? And I was just, I mean, you can just imagine as a small mom and pop business owner, I was freaking out. And so I like took a deep breath and was like, okay, could you please like send me a photo? We're so sorry. Meanwhile, I'm like, do I need to call the health department? What did I do? I served somebody a mouse in their soup. It can't get worse than this. So she sent me a photo of it. And it turned out that it was the rind of the Parmesan that after it boiled, it just sort of turned round. And it was the shape of a mouse body, but I don't think I could, it took me like a week to get over it. Like my heart was just
Wow.
not the same afterwards. So you don't want to eat it, but it's great in soups. I'm going to fill this up with water.
Allison, we got a question from Caitlin who's asking your take on organic versus conventional ingredients, just in general.
Great. So right now, eat what you can find. But normally, I think, you know, we all need to have an as best we can do approach. So I do not buy everything for my family organic. I can't afford it. I can't find it. Sometimes it just isn't possible. That said, buying organic when you can typically would mean that there's less harmful pesticides and things that were applied to it during growing. And that is definitely bad for us to consume. But hold on one second. Okay. But the other part of that is if you picture all of those pesticides being applied to the plants as they're growing and then them being watered, all of those pesticides also end up in the dirt and in the water. And then that water runs off and then it adds to the rivers, which ultimately ends up in the ocean. So that's how, like, when they've looked at salmon, you know, that live out in the ocean, they have traces of those same pesticides that we use in our factory farming. So it's not even just whether or not you're eating broccoli that's organic or not. It's affecting our entire planet and the entire food ecosystem. So for that reason, it's important to support better growing methods. But the tricky part about organics is that our current organic system, like if you go to the grocery store and you see like that green organic label on it, a lot of that is money. So people might be growing their products in an organic way, but it costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars to become and remain certified. It doesn't mean that they aren't doing the same practices, but they don't have the extra $100,000 every year to remain certified. And then on the other side of the coin, we don't have enough inspectors to make sure that the people who are granted the label are actually continuing to grow in a way that would allow them to remain certified. So trusting the label a little bit is okay. But also, if you like, the holy grail obviously is like talk to the person who planted your vegetables, which is ridiculously elitist and not always possible. I don't even do that. But when I can, if I can go to the farmer's market, or, you know, even more so when I had a restaurant that served hundreds or maybe even thousands of people, if you count catering, every week, at that point, I was in a position to work with farmers and really make sure that I was making the right kind of purchases to support a better food system. So as a consumer, it might be a lot easier just to sort of trust companies or restaurants or local people making your food, so you can talk to them and then they have an easier time kind of making that big decision, if that makes sense. So it's complicated. And I think one of the ways to break it down is to not try to make every decision every time you go shopping, but find some favorites and stick to them, and then choose maybe one, if you want to improve what you're eating or the quality of what you're eating, every time you go shopping, like choose 1 or 2 things that you'll aim to improve upon then, and then always buy that brand going forward. So that way your shopping can still be as easy, but you're not trying to go like from 0 to 60 in one shopping trip, or you'll go crazy that way. It wouldn't be realistic to implement.
Thanks.
Okay.
I love the nuanced answer. It's authentic and true.
The what?
I love the nuanced, like in-depth answer. It's so true. It's not an easy answer. It's
not. Yeah, it's not. Okay, so meal number 1. Oh, let's see my okay. This is what was under my chicken. Can you guys see that in the light? Ooh, it smells so good. So this would basically be meal number 1. So I should have had like a plate. Sorry for the loud noise. Okay, so meal number 1. This is actually coming up as an Ends and Stems recipe. So any of my Ends and Stems subscribers here, you're gonna get this one coming up soon. I threw some asparagus in there, and these potatoes are, you know, like if you go to some of the fancy restaurants and they make like French fries cooked in duck fat or whatever, cooked in chicken drippings like this, just makes them so good. It's like the perfect Sunday meal. Okay.
Hey, quick question. And actually it was a question I had in my mind too from Mac. He's asking if you can keep your veggie scraps for the stock in the freezer.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's, you keep the, like, grab all your scraps as you use them, put them in a bag, keep it in the freezer, and then that should be like a good way to keep it all, rather than just composting it. And
exactly. So as I'm cooking, I usually have like 1 bucket set up that's for things that I will compost, and then a separate bucket for things, or just the trash can for like stickers or any type of plastic that you encounter. And then I have a separate little bowl that I put out for things that I'll eventually freeze. And then I just have a bag that's kind of running in the freezer all the time. And then when I go to make the stock, if it's a day where I have the chicken and I'm gonna get started right now, you know, you can dump them in frozen. You don't need to thaw them first. You just fill it with water and get it going. And then if I'm going to cook it later, you just put it all in the freezer and then it's ready to go whenever you need to do it. And it's so hands off. You don't need to do anything to it. It cooks for about an hour, but it, you know, it takes a little while to come up to a boil. So the whole project is probably maybe a 2-hour project. So it's great to do like on a Sunday morning or on a day you're working from home. And I really wanted to do the recipe today and put it in this packet because, you know, if you are a meat eater, obviously, there's almost nothing better than like the smell of chicken soup. And that's what it smells like, you know, like your grandma came over and made you chicken soup. It's awesome. And the other thing is, if you make too much stock or too much soup, it freezes beautifully. So you can leave, you know, whenever I recommend to freeze it in little containers so that you have maybe a cup or 2 at a time. That way, if you want to make sauces later or just a small amount of soup at another time, you don't have to go through this whole process. I maybe make stock like once a month and then just have a whole bunch in the freezer to use when I need it. So it doesn't have to be, you know, this big deal. One thing I did want to say though, Tony, you had asked about how many chicken carcasses to use in there. If you wanted to make it more like bone broth, you would want more. So, you know, it's kind of trendy now. Everybody's drinking that. You can make that at home really, really easily. But I would maybe, for this size, for the hybrid pot, how many quarts is the hybrid pot?
7.
7
to the rim. I mean, like really, like it'll hold 6 super comfortably and be able to do it.
So for that, you would probably want to do 2. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, my best guess, totally winging it, would be at the end, you're going to end up with about 3 quarts of bone broth max. By the time you put the chicken in there, and then as you simmer it, you know, you'll lose some of it too, and it condenses. Maybe even you get 2.5 quarts. So, okay, so number 1, so good, super delicious, easy. I would serve this at a dinner party. I mean, it doesn't have to be fancier than that.
I'm sorry, I missed the first 10 minutes, and so you put the vegetables at the bottom of a big pot like that. and then you put the chicken on top, and then you baked everything.
Yep.
Took the chicken out and continued to bake the vegetables a little bit more. Is that right?
I did, yes. And you know, for deciding whether or not to put the vegetables back in would depend on. Hi, bud. Hi, I see your penguin. We have another cameo. This is the rest of the fam. Can you say hi?
Hi.
What's happening?
Oh, we have that penguin too.
2.5. Will he have these vague memories of when we were all locked up together or not? I don't know. So I put right away in the pan, I did the sliced onion and the garlic. And then I added potatoes later. And then at the very end, I added the asparagus. I like my asparagus really crispy still. So I really wanted to cook that for like 6 or 7 minutes.
So what cooked with the chicken? The potatoes and the onions and garlic?
Onions and garlic for the whole time.
Right.
Then about 10 minutes into it, I added the potatoes. And at that time, I actually also added a sliced lemon. And then they cooked for about 35 minutes with the chicken. And then I put in the asparagus. And that's how I've written the recipe too, to do it that way. I will say my potatoes, I cut them pretty large today. So when my chicken was done, my potatoes were not. So that's why I removed the chicken and put the potatoes back in the oven until they were ready. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Looks delicious.
So good. All right. I am going.
Thanks, Blair. Like I'm cooking it.
That's okay. All right. Now, what I have here are the chicken thighs. They've cooled down now. So I'm going to take the skin off of them. The other thing that I love about the dark meat is that it shreds up really easily. So we're going to shred this. We're back to talking about enchiladas now. So I've got my beans in here. And again, this was just a can of beans. If you have dried beans sitting in your can that have been in there for a while, why not use quarantine time to cook some dried beans? I use canned beans a lot. Honestly, they're easy, they're convenient, they're always there. But when you cook dried beans from scratch, there is really something very just special and velvety and delicious about them.
Do you typically like soak the dried beans, and for how long? And does it between different types of beans?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can soak any dried beans. You know, they always just say overnight. So I usually do it late at night. It's like the last thing I do. I leave it on the counter. Mm-hmm. You don't want to leave it out on the counter for like more than 24 hours or they'll actually start to sprout, which you can eat. But like if you've ever seen like sprouted wheat or sprouted quinoa, that's what's happening. They're still kind of growing. But so I usually just do it overnight, 10 p.m. to maybe 8 or 9 or whatever the next day, or you could leave it up till dinner time. They cook more quickly then because they've been able to soak up some water, so they're softer. So chickpeas, if they've soaked overnight, they really only take maybe 20, 25 minutes to cook. Black beans also, if you've soaked black beans, like black turtle beans overnight, they'll cook up in like 15, 20 minutes. So I often, and same with pinto beans, they maybe take about 20, 25 if you're soaking them. The only ones that I consistently soak overnight are garbanzo beans and white beans. So black beans, I almost never do because if you just boil black beans, they'll still be done in like 45, 50 minutes. And for me, that's not a big deal. They just don't take that long. And so pretty much any bean, if you don't soak them, you just boil them longer and they'll still cook up. You do have to kind of make sure they stay covered with water, and also you want to make sure to stir them often because your water can pretty easily evaporate below the level of the beans, and then the ones that are not fully submerged won't cook evenly. So that's kind of the big thing. You can use tons of water, use as big of a pot as you can. Okay, so I've got my bones.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Good. I was a little late to the party, and I'm curious to know if the whole chicken was baked in the Dutch oven.
Yeah.
And how did it get so brown? Did you then put it in the regular oven?
Well, okay, so I put the whole Dutch oven, as they say, in the, here, I'll show you. I put this whole thing in the oven. So it actually just, I used this almost like a roasting pan. So it still was open on the top, but cooking in the regular oven.
Okay. So the Dutch oven aspect wasn't being used at that point.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I put it in there.
Do you always cook chicken uncovered, Alison?
I always do. Yeah. I barely think you can get like a 3.5 to 4.5 pound roasting chicken brown enough in the oven. I like it really, really brown. So it will always cook quickly. If you're doing like a turkey or a bigger chicken, I don't think you'll really find a bigger chicken really without specifically trying. But if you're doing a turkey like a Thanksgiving, I also roast it uncovered until it starts getting really brown. And then I just cover the little top piece with foil so that the edges still have time to get browned. So this too, garlic peels for my roasted garlic. I like the flavor of garlic, especially roasted garlic, which is a little bit sweeter. So I'm going to put that right in my stock too. That would be something you could freeze. And then I have this delicious roasted garlic. So you can, where'd my regular knife go? You can just take the side of your knife and smash this. And it's so creamy and delicious. So this is where, for that roasted chicken meal, if you want to just make a quick sauce, you can do the roasted garlic. Let's see if I have a little bowl. You can take some of the roasted garlic, put it in your bowl, do a little bit of olive oil, and then, hold on, one of these roasted lemons that was in the pan too, or you can use a fresh lemon, and then just whisk that together. If you have any herbs, you could chop up herbs and put them in here, and you kind of get this like really flavorful paste. If you do more lemon juice, it'll be more of a sauce, and you can pour this over. This is kind of like a, there's a Greek sauce called chermoula, which is really similar to that. Or if you put chopped up parsley in here, it's really similar to a gremolata, which usually has raw garlic, not roasted garlic, but you would chop lemon, garlic, and parsley together and sprinkle it typically over roast meats. It's like the really classic topping for ossobuco or some like big braised beefy roast, but it's really bright and flavorful. Just those 3 simple ingredients done on top of anything. So I love this because you've already cooked these flavors with that chicken. I love them sort of sprinkled on top. Okay, let's talk enchiladas. We good?
We're good.
Okay, so I tossed my, Tony, you're Italian, right? Do you do ossobuco? Where are you from?
Santo Stefano, which is like south of Rome. That's where my family's from. And yeah, ossobuco, not so much. I did have
more northern,
my friend Lawrence Jossel made a whole big ossobuco. I saw it one of the photos that he sent. It looks beautiful. But I'm more of like a simple kind of like pan pasta kind of guy.
I think ossobuco is more like northern, Milan. Okay.
There it is.
So I'm going to take a little bit of this enchilada sauce, which is now cooled to the touch, and I'm just going to put it in here and then toss this. So again, this is just so we can do like a one-stop filling, and we don't need to come back to it every time. So then I have a gas stove here, which I love for this purpose, but from a sustainability point of view, I think we're going to be saying goodbye to gas stoves in the near future here. So if you have an induction stove, you can actually just pop the tortillas in the oven for a minute. But the idea is you basically just want to warm them up so that they're, these are 6-inch corn tortillas. So they just get a little more pliable this way. All right. Or in the oven, same thing. So with these, then we're going to dip these right in here. And because the sauce has been turned off for a little while, I can actually get my finger in there and I'm not burning myself. So put them right down on your work surface. I usually do 3 at a time, whatever you can fit. All right. Then we're going to do a little bit of filling just like across the center. It's so easy because it's all mixed together. It also helps it stay really even this way. If you did 3 different containers of filling, it would be harder to eyeball whether or not your beans and cheese and everything is even. The other great way to do this, I'm sure you guys, here's a good one for homeschool, right? Kids need math. So if you look at your bowl like this and kind of settle everything in there and you know you want to make 12 enchiladas, you can divide this in half. Now you know you need 6 and 6. You could divide it again. And then from each little visible pile, you only need to get 3 and then you'll have 12. So that's how you can really eyeball to make sure all of your fillings turn out the same. That's an old catering trick.
I'm gonna eat them all.
Right? You can do it if you're making meatballs or anything. Okay, so I'm gonna do just a little bit of sauce in the bottom of my pan. Just enough to kind of coat it and give them a place to land. Let's move this. This to me, you could eat this fresh. We could eat this tonight when you're done baking it. This goes in the freezer. If I had to bring a meal to somebody who was in need of a meal for whatever reason, I would totally bring this. It's crowd pleaser. It's got some steps to it, but once you make it, it's really easy to, double up, make a bunch, get it in the, and it also reheats really, really well. So if somebody didn't eat this for 3 or 4 days, it's actually still gonna taste great. All right.
It looks delicious.
So good. And the flavor of the sauce. So now that the tomatoes and chilies have really kind of cooked in here for a while, that really fresh, bright smell of the jalapenos has turned more into the, like I'm smelling the spices. All right. So I will spare you watching me make all of these, but we'll do, what do I have, 6 here. And just roll them up. So then you're gonna take them seam side down and then just make sure you set them here seam side down. Personally, I don't think you should use flour tortillas for this. I actually was like going down the internet rabbit hole the other day and somebody was arguing with a food blogger who called for flour tortillas in enchiladas. I don't think you should really use flour tortillas. They get really soggy. The corn tortillas like help thicken up the sauce, and I think they just come out better. So I'm kind of a stickler for flour tortillas in your enchiladas here. But if I had, let's say I only had flour tortillas and was thinking about this, I would actually just turn the whole thing into like a fancy quesadilla instead. And you could do the sauce and the filling, but then pan sear both sides of the flour tortilla. Or if you roll flour tortillas up like this and then fry them in like an inch and a half of oil, you get flautas, which are delicious. So I would try that instead of trying to make this dish with flour tortillas, just in case anyone on the internet is asking. So I would do 2 rows like this. And then I saved all the delicious cheese. We do a big mountain of cheese on top like this. You see those? Oh, look at that.
Oh, they look great.
And pop that in the oven. So everything in there is cooked. So you're really just kind of heating it through. All right, we're moving that. And let's see. You're really just heating it through. And then when it's done, I would top it with enchiladas. Top it with avocado, and if you have radishes or fresh cilantro, but you don't really need any of that, especially if you're not buying it now. So we've been going for a little while. I see most people haven't left, but my other dish here was to make chicken soup. So I'm just gonna walk you through that quickly. What I would do is get this stock going. I'm gonna pick this up. I really want you to see this. Can you see like the little bits of foamy stuff that are happening right here? Mm-hmm. That's just like impurities coming out of the vegetables or the chicken. It's not too bad here, but depending on what you put in there, it's like proteins coagulating. It's not gonna hurt anything, but the classic way to make a really beautiful stock is to take a ladle and just kind of get up next to it and just push the ladle ever so slightly under the level of the foam. And you'll see like a little waterfall starts into the bottom of the ladle. And then you can grab that foamy stuff and just get rid of it, because you don't really want it in your final stock, and then that's what will make it really cloudy. So this will make a beautiful chicken stock if you go through and do that. So I would let this cook for probably about 45 solid minutes, and then this maybe is controversial. I should put it on one of those Facebook things I don't like that everybody else seems to like. But I don't like actual pieces of chicken in my chicken soup. Is that weird? Anyone else with me? So I always, and I don't think my kids do either, or maybe they're just too little to talk back to me yet. So they're just doing whatever I tell them at this point. I don't know, but we'll go with that. So for my soup, I really just do onion, celery, carrot, saute it in the pan, and then add the stock to it. And then my secret flavor ingredients would be a tiny, tiny bit of nutmeg and then a little bit of lemon zest. And then at the very end, you do your noodles. And that's basically it. It's just simple, beautiful, easygoing chicken soup. And that's what I'll do with the rest of this pot. So if you guys follow up with us and get the recipes and everything, and then make sure you check us out on social media, I'll finish this soup and then I'll have a post of that afterwards. How's that sound?
Awesome. Great.
Sound good? So I think we're good. Well, I'll see if we have any other questions, and then I'll show you guys the enchiladas, which will come out of the oven in a couple minutes. But anything else from you guys, Tony, Chris?
I'm just excited to see. I want to see how that stock finishes up. And so you say you cook it for exactly how long, or what is too long to be cooking down a stock?
Yeah, that's a great point. So if you cook it too long, basically the vegetables will just get bitter, and you'll reduce it too much. But I mean, man, you would have to cook it for a long time to get to that point. I used to work in a commissary kitchen a long time ago with the company Hoppa Ramen. They're like a big trendy ramen cart. And those guys would boil their stock. They actually had to have 2 shifts of employees because they boiled their stock for like 12 hours and needed like a second shift to come in and manage it. And basically they were just getting it to the point where once it's cold, all of the collagen came out of the bones and it turned into like jelly, stock that turns into jelly. So that's how you do that. So if you want to make bone broth, you would actually want to cook it longer. But to do that, you need to start with a ton of water because it's also going to reduce. So for chicken stock like this, once it's fully boiling, which this still isn't even, I would say about an hour is a safe bet for a chicken stock like this. But if you left it for 2 hours, you hardly would be able to tell the difference. What you'll see is that it's a little more golden in color afterwards.
Can you keep it uncovered during that time, or?
I do keep it uncovered for quite a while. Yeah, because you do want a little bit of reduction to happen in there too. The other thing I wanted to say that I do often is instead of putting like a chicken carcass in there, if I don't have a roasted chicken, but I still want stock and to make the other recipes, I'll actually poach the whole raw chicken in here and kind of skip the roasting dish. And technically, geeking out on terms, the difference between stock and broth comes from boiling the meat. So if you do a whole chicken in there, you're making broth versus just the bones, you're making stock. The other difference usually is that broth has salt in it and stock doesn't. But I do the broth version a lot too. And then what you get is a beautiful poached chicken at the end of it. But that one you probably want to go for about an hour and a half to make sure that the meat cooks all the way through. And then you still have time to develop the flavor that you want from the broth.
Awesome. This is great for me because I have been roasting a number of chickens at home, and we get down to the carcass and I haven't been able to pull the trigger on making the stock myself. So now watching you is giving me a lot of confidence in how to do it. So
yeah. So if you're kind of getting crazy at home, let's say you had also like a pork shoulder that had a bone in it and you have that left over, you can mix it and do a pork bone in there too. And then you would have like a really interesting soup base. We're doing
ramen
this week, which is one of my favorites. Yeah, you'd have an amazing ramen base. And that's how they used to do that too, is kind of like mixed bone base. I don't think you're going to come across any beef bones unless you like specifically aim to find them. But I do find that a roast comes up.
With all these people, everybody here on the Zoom, we're gonna have a stock off or something like that.
I love it. Yeah, stock off, and I've got. Let's see if I have this thing. No, I don't. I have this. It's kind of like a giant ice cube tray, and it's each of the squares for the cubes is about a pint. So you can kind of freeze giant pints of stock at a time. It's called Super Cubes. The thing's amazing. I love it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Alison, I'm going to take this as inspiration and stock up, no pun intended,
Right.
on all the
Pun
ingredients
intended,
you-
Chris.
So, yeah, I could have counted, but honestly, to make a roast chicken dinner, chicken enchiladas, and chicken noodle soup, I think we only had, maybe 20, 22 ingredients. And there's nothing really that rare or hard to find. I'm still cooking for some people. I've been cooking for UCSF a little bit still. So I've been out to the stores, and there's nothing here that I use today that's challenging to find. On and off, it seems to be with the exception of the whole roast chicken. So if you could not find a whole chicken, you could definitely just buy chicken legs. And this would be a great method to go for chicken legs if you aren't somebody who would feel excited about like roasting and eating chicken leg. You could just skip to the enchilada part or the chicken soup part. And then obviously if you're not like me and you actually want bits of chicken in your chicken soup, you can use the shredded dark meat, or you could cube up some of the breast meat and put that in there too.
Awesome. Great. Well, yeah, let's just see Blair turn on her video. Anyone who's still here, please feel free to join in and join the conversation. I know no one has crazy plans tonight, I don't think, so feel free to hang out with us here. And
I gotta go eat enchiladas though.
So they cook that quickly. Oh, because the meat is already cooked.
Yeah, so everything was already cooked. So if you can see, they've got a little bit crunchy on the ends. And this is totally melted, and it's melted all the way through inside. So they really don't need to go in the oven that long. However, I would routinely make these ahead of time, put the whole thing uncooked in the refrigerator, and then so you'd have this like the next night, and then you'll probably want to give them like a full 30 minutes so that they heat all the way through. And you might want to, you can kind of see how it goes, but I might cover it with foil for like at least the first 10 or 12 minutes as well, if you're having them the next night. But everything I put in here was warm, so it didn't take very long at all.
Right. No, my question was actually just to reiterate the enchilada sauce is just a few ingredients. It's just tomatoes and pepper, chili pepper, and cumin, basically. And
onion,
is that right? Am I forgetting something?
Onion and some garlic cloves. But if you don't have garlic and you have garlic powder, you can totally use garlic powder. Yeah, so this is sort of my quick, my cheater enchilada sauce of basically like a pantry version. Another great idea that I can't remember if I wrote down is if you have a can of chipotle peppers, but no chili powder, or you wanted to kind of mix it up, that would be a great use to make like a chipotle enchilada sauce. If you kind of like that smoky, spicy flavor, you could put as much or as little in there to taste.
I was wondering.
What if you don't want, sorry, I have one more question about the sauce. What if you don't want any spice, like any heat? Mm-hmm. Like you want flavor, but you don't want any heat. Like kids don't eat spicy.
Omit the fresh jalapeno entirely. And just do the either tomatoes or canned tomatoes, and use just the classic chili powder, like the chili powder blend that you buy from any grocery store. That doesn't really have any heat to it at all, typically.
Right.
And then you'd be good to go. You wouldn't be adding anything spicy to it, but you still get that like depth of chili flavor from it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Felicia wanted to know, what's the size of the knife that you're using? It looks gigantic.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Felicia.
This is, so I have two, but this is my favorite one. This is just a Wusthof. It's a classic 8-inch chef's knife. So I'm a really big fan of this knife. It's not very expensive. I mean, it's still like maybe $110, but this thing will last you for 10 years. So in the scheme of things, it's not very expensive. The thing you want to look for when you buy a knife is to make sure that the blade is forged all the way through the handle, versus like, see how this has like rivets here? Sometimes you'll see knives that have this, but then the blade stops here and it doesn't go all the way through. So that's called stamped. And then basically when you're holding the handle, you're not also holding the blade, and it's just a lower quality knife. And then that's typically just glued together. And then after washing and using it, it could start to loosen up on you. Where when I'm holding this, I'm also holding really the whole blade. So you'll see, like if you look online, even like Wusthof or any of the big ones have the inexpensive version. So if you see a knife that's like $50 and you're wondering why is this one 50 and this other one is 100, it's almost definitely because it's not forged all the way through. So you're getting way less metal, it's not as heavy, and it's not going to last you as long. So if you take care of a knife like this, it'll last you. I think I've had 2 in my whole life, and I've cooked more food than you'll probably cook in the next 20 years with just 2 knives. The other thing is that don't let anyone else touch it. I don't want anyone coming to my kitchen and touch my knife. I joke always, my husband does so many of the dishes around here, but as soon as I'm done prepping, I take this to the sink, I wash it by hand, I dry it off, and I put it away.
Absolutely.
So nobody else comes near it, it's just mine. And then the other one I have was gifted to me from a friend a really long time ago. So this one is a Japanese style knife. It's shorter, it's a santoku style. This one is crazy expensive. I probably never would have bought this one, but I had a friend who was a salesperson for them, and he sometimes just got a bunch of them. So thank you, Earl. I love this knife. Yeah, this one, I've taken this one into kitchens, and other line cooks have tried to buy it off me because these are like, people are passionate about these. But again, if you take really good care of it, it should last for your whole life. I do like, if you get a secondary knife, I do like this style, this kind of santoku style, as opposed to kind of the long, skinny chef knife style. It's really fun for chopping things. But I did not slice my chicken with this one. I would never like cut through a bone. In general, Japanese knives have a thinner and more delicate blade. So you might actually get chunks kind of taken out of it if you're really rough with this one. So you really don't want to come to my house and try to use this knife. I would be very mad.
Allison, hi.
Hi.
I'm Chris's mother-in-law. Oh my God. We were trying to cook the enchiladas as you were talking, and we used canned tomatoes just because it was quick.
Yeah.
And the sauce has too much of an Italian thing going on. You know, it's a little bit sweet. Maybe we didn't cook it down long enough, and we also improvised on the herbs. We didn't know how much to put in, so we probably didn't put in enough.
Sure. So sometimes, especially if you buy Italian tomatoes, they might actually already have some of the Italian spices added to them. So typically when I buy canned tomatoes, I try to find the ones that don't have anything added to them. And then if you were here when we were talking about grocery shopping too, finding your brand of canned tomatoes that you like the taste of is a perfect example of this, where maybe you want to try a bunch and then ultimately get to one can that you really like the taste of. But in general, I would prefer not to have any sugar added to mine as well.
Right.
But I don't know if you can look back at your can if you had one that was like seasoned or Italian flavored or something like that.
Right. Yep. Where is the recipe on your site? I only got to the place where you put in your ingredients and
these recipes are not on the site, so you need to ping Bridget, and we're gonna get everybody's email and send out these recipes. And right. I mean, I see a lot of people on there, so I'm gonna say this is a crazy success. I thought it might just be me, Chris, and Tony here, but if we do this again, which we love to do, we will send out the recipes and the ingredients way in advance, and give people a chance to buy what they need so that we could cook along together next time, if people like that idea.
I love that.
If you have your sauce going now, what I would do is add more, first of all, keep cooking it so that it gets nice and thick, but you could add more chili powder to it. And a real way to kind of add a lot of flavor, if you happen to have canned chipotle peppers, those are really, really potent, and then that will tip it onto the side of a more Southwest style and a little bit spicier. Or just add more chili powder to it, and then you'll kind of get that chili flavor. You could even, if you like the taste of cumin, you can add more cumin to it too, just to kind of balance it out a little bit more in that direction. Or we can just call them, what do they call it? Hybrid enchiladas, and put some artichoke hearts in there, and call them Italian enchiladas, and see what happens.
Italo-Latino enchiladas.
Fusion. That's the word. Fusion.
Fusion.
And you're gonna go. You invented fusion enchiladas, and they actually sound amazing.
I want to taste them.
Put some salami chopped up in there and see what happens.
Oh, that
Tastes
sounds
pretty good. I love it.
Yeah. Allison, is a mole like a derivative of an enchilada sauce, or is that a different approach?
It's sort of a different thing. I called it a mole enchilada because it was made in a blender and it had more dried spices, which typically a mole would have. A mole is like this really classic sauce. It's like from the Oaxaca area. There's actually like, I think hundreds of different types of moles. You can have different colors. They can have, different flavor profiles, but typically they have like 47 ingredients, but you do make it sort of blender style like that. And then you cook it, and then you would stew meat in it or serve it over the meat. The famous mole that everybody always talks about is the one that has chocolate in it. But it's more, so the more classic enchilada sauce would be like, I did it here with a fresh tomato, fresh onion, and then the mole would kind of typically be filled out with more dried spices and things. But once you get the final sauce, like a mole is both a sauce and a meal. So you could take mole sauce and make enchiladas from it, which is more what we did here. That's why I called it that.
Tony, I gotta say, I love, and Allison, thank you. I mean, I loved seeing here, chatting with you, and watching that stock boil away in the Proclamation right there. Tony and I have put so much time in bringing that to market, and to see you making use of it is really a treat.
I'm telling you,
thank you so much for joining us here and sharing your skill with everybody.
I do honestly have to keep joking with people that I am not employed by Proclamation. I'm not selling the pans. I love the shape of this pan or pot, whatever you call it, so much because it's so unique. I've never had one in this shape. But because it has a flat bottom and it's so wide at the top, you can use it like a saute pan. But then when you need the space, it actually becomes a pot. The lid fits on it amazingly. It's just such a unique and cool, and honestly, it's heavy and well made. And when we were doing the last Ends and Stems photo shoot, I actually had a couple other chefs come over my house. They were helping me prep and do all the photos. And I didn't even bring it up. It was just sitting on my stovetop because we were doing so much prep that day. And even the two other chefs came in and they were like, what's this pan? Like, I've never heard of this company. Where do they make them? So even with no promotion of it at all, the chefs who came through picked it out. So it's a really awesome product.
I'm glad you mentioned something, because I know you're partnering with Proclamation, but I was just wondering, where'd you get that pan?
Exactly.
It's cool. It's our own exclusive design. And honestly, 7 quarts is kind of incomparable in the marketplace. There's not a lot of pans with that size. But as we were designing it, we were like, go big or go home. And honestly, the versatility of it, which was so, that's what we designed into it. Flat on the bottom so that you can fit a whole chicken in there, splayed on the sides, and like have that round so you can like use it as a wok, and then deep enough and flat enough on the side so that you can boil pasta and make a stock, as Allison's doing today.
Totally. And then I love that they did this too. This is all you, right, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. The two go together like that, and it's able to. So yeah, so if you have a big chicken or anything, or a mound of greens that you're cooking, and sometimes you can't get the lid on there, and a lot of times Chris's point of view was that chefs in general, and he found that he would just go reaching for another pan to use as a lid. Yep. And so we wanted to integrate the two together so that they work together, and I think it's worked out really well.
And so I've taken to just keeping it on my stovetop. So now it's just kind of my go-to. It's the one that's there. It's a beautiful set. I really, really love it. Yeah, it's fun to cook with.
Got personality.
Yeah.
You cook with it, and can't wait to share a meal in person with you, Allison.
I know, right?
Oh.
Uh-oh.
You woke up the dog.
Yeah, right. We got my tiniest fans.
That was actually, you know what? And then we shared a meal. Actually, the first time that we met, you came over to the office and you cooked for us really quickly. And it was amazing to see. That was your first real interaction with us in the pans. And it was amazing to watch how naturally you use them and how everything went together so seamlessly.
And
You had
we
roll
put
a bowl.
rice in this. Remember, I went right for it. I was like, I'm gonna cook the rice in that pan, and you're like, oh, I don't know, it might be too big. And it, again, because of the way the sides taper up and the lid fit perfectly, the rice came out great. It was, and we only cooked, I don't know, maybe 6 servings of rice, and it came out great.
Yeah.
It was very cool. Yeah.
We've got photos of that, and that recipe I know is one of yours, and definitely on your site. And so absolutely check out the Ends and Stems and see that recipe on there as well.
Yeah, and to be clear on that, thanks Tony for bringing that up. So we wanted to get going and start doing some events like this as soon as we could. So we rushed that and don't have everything set up. So we're doing things a little bit analog this time around. If you could, and you're interested, you want to get this recipe and learn more about Ends and Stems Proclamation, just shoot Bridget a note on the Zoom chat here. You also can reach out to team@proclamationgoods.com. We'll get to go into the right place. Alison, if you have a catch-all email address, feel free to add it, or we can direct it your way.
Yeah, or even on Instagram, it's just Alison with 1 L at Ends and Stems, or just DM me on Instagram or Facebook or any of those. And truly, to anybody who came here to watch, thank you for joining us. This was super fun.